By the 1850s, the issues surrounding slavery had divided the nation. Many people felt that compromise on these issues was no longer possible. Charles Sumner, an abolitionist and Republican senator from Massachusetts, put the issue of compromise over slavery this way. "From the beginning of our history, the country has been afflicted with compromise. It is by compromise that human rights have been abandoned." Sumner believed there could be no compromise. Slavery was immoral and unjust. It had to be abolished. Many in the South felt equally justified in their defense of slavery. So much so that a senator from South Carolina beat Sumner with a cane in the Senate chamber for attacking slavery in a speech. Southern newspapers celebrated the beating, foreshadowing the Civil War, while Northern newspapers were appalled by the caning and the South's rejection of free speech and civil debate. Today's lesson explores the different values and perceptions that divided the United States before the Civil War. The lesson's essential question is, to what extent did sectional differences influence the outbreak and outcome of the Civil War? The guiding questions are, how did different economic values and practices between each section contribute to the Civil War? How did different cultural values and practices between each section contribute to the Civil War? How did different political values between each section contribute to the Civil War? Clearly, there was a problem if senators were beating one another in the nation's capital. But how did the relationship between America's political leaders get so bad? Let's dig in and find out. In the first half of the 19th century, the North and South developed different economies, cultures, and political values. This period of U.S. history is characterized by sectionalism because slavery had caused the nation to develop into two sections, each with its own economic, cultural, and political structures and values. During this period, people in each region saw one another as different and sometimes even stopped thinking of themselves as part of the same country. To understand why, let's start by looking at the economic differences between each section. The South's reliance on slavery and large plantations favored agriculture and hampered industrial growth. Most Southern state governments were controlled by plantation owners, who often neglected promoting economic development. The plantation owners had no incentive to support economic programs that could potentially undermine their control over society. In the average Southern state, about 1/3 of the population were slave owners. Yet, this small percentage controlled most economic opportunities in the South. In contrast, the North focused on industrialization by opening factories and state-sponsored infrastructure projects, both of which were supported by a growing number of immigrants. By the time of the Civil War, northern cities were teeming with factories, railroads, shipping warehouses, and skilled craftsmen. For instance, New England alone had 878 textile factories by the start of the Civil War, while Georgia, the only southern state that prioritized industrialization before the Civil War, had only 33. By the time of the Civil War, there were also 11,000 more miles of railroad tracks in the North than in the South. All of these investments in industry created more economic opportunities for the average citizen in the North. How might these differences have caused issues between the two sections? The development of sectional economies increased tensions because each section wanted different things from the government. Northern businessmen and workers wanted protectionist policies to give local industries a competitive advantage and slavery banned in the West to help encourage the spread of industry. The South wanted free trade policies because retaliatory tariffs from other countries would hurt the export of their agricultural goods. Southerners also felt it was their right to bring enslaved people into any territory or state. These economic differences also led to sectional cultures because it created different lifestyles for the individuals and communities in each section. Before we move on, let's answer the first guiding question. How did different economic values and practices between each section contribute to the Civil War? Slavery deepened the cultural differences between the North and the South, increasing sectionalism and making the outbreak of war inevitable. In the South, the plantation owners' control of economic opportunity created a highly hierarchical, rigid society. Agriculture, primarily done by enslaved people, was the foundation of Southern culture and society. The reliance on slavery and a lack of investment in industry meant the majority of the free population in the South had limited financial resources and minimal opportunities for advancement. Additionally, Southern society was primarily rural, with only a few moderately sized cities like New Orleans, Charleston, and Richmond. Due to concerns about slave revolts and anti-slavery messages, as well as a lack of migration to the South became a closed, resistant society that often rejected new ideas. For example, it was a crime to have or distribute abolitionist literature such as Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, a book about the harsh realities of slavery. In contrast, the northern states prohibited slavery, relying instead on a continuous influx of immigrants from Europe as a source of labor. This diversity and social mobility shaped northern society and culture. As a result of immigration and industrialization, the northern cities experienced urbanization in the decades leading up to the Civil War. For example, 7 of the nation's 10 largest cities were in the north, while 2 were in the border states and only 1 in the South. The northern cities provided a fertile ground for the acceptance and spread of new scientific, religious, and cultural ideas, unlike the impoverished countryside of the South. During this period, churches were one of the most important cultural institutions in America. By the 1850s, many of the national churches had split over the issue of slavery, refusing to recognize church officials from the opposite section. How do you think these sectional differences impacted cultural unity in America? The issues surrounding slavery drove a wedge between the two sections. People no longer saw one another as members of one culture and country. By the time of the Civil War, cultural exchanges such as religion, art, and literature, and even technologies no longer took place between the North and South. The cultural divisions that appeared in the United States helped create different interpretations of the political values established by the framers. We'll take a look at that next. For now, answer the next guiding question. How did different cultural values and practices between each section contribute to the Civil War? Lastly, slavery impacted how the North and South interpreted America's founding political values, pushing the nation towards a civil war. First, each section argued that their society better reflected the founders' original political values. Each side claimed that the opposite section betrayed those values. Southerners claimed their society reflected the founders' intention to create a system that limited federal power in favor of greater state power. In contrast, Northern politicians claimed that their society embraced the democratic and capitalist foundation that the founders had embedded into America's political values. They argued that American society was a national democracy led by the federal government rather than state governments. Northerners pointed to the numerous political parties competing in Northern elections and voter turnouts that reached as high as 90%. Secondly, the debate over slavery provided the lens in which each section viewed the Constitution. Southerners argued that the Constitution guaranteed the right and protection of private property, including enslaved people. Anything short of that was tyranny. They pointed to the Three-Fifths Compromise as part of the original compact between sections that secured the rights and power of Southerners and slavery. Northerners argued that the Constitution guaranteed equality above all else. According to Northerners, slavery and its expansion threatened equality in all rights, which in their view was the foundation of the Constitution and American society. In speech after speech, Senator Sumner reiterated this idea. Equal rights of all, the great guarantee and necessity for the sake of security and to maintain a Republican government. Slavery led to sectional interpretations of the Constitution and America's political values. This was made clear by the caning of Sumner and the eventual outbreak of the Civil War. Before we wrap up, let's answer the final question. How did different political values between each section contribute to the Civil War? By the 1850s, it was as if the United States had become two nations, each with its own economy, culture, and political values. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln ran on a free soil platform, arguing that slavery should not expand west because it destroyed wage labor opportunities. He won the election, but it was the first presidential election decided on sectional lines. Northerners voted for Lincoln, whereas Southerners voted for the Democratic candidate. Immediately after the election, Southerners called for secession. Lincoln and the Northern Republicans claimed secession was unconstitutional. The Civil War had arrived. In the PDF, we will look into how these sectional differences influence the outcome of the Civil War. Until then, keep making history. Hey!